My name is Carl Wien, a bad guy who is thrown on this bird and doesn't poop on it. He is an explorer and it sounds cool, but in fact he is a tool for selling his life for the Empire. A few years ago, I was sent to a broken place called Wild Bone Star to carry out exploration missions. As a result, the flight was damaged and the communication was interrupted. The Empire's helping me was directly aired and there was no trace of rescue. From that day on, I became the only living person on this planet, at least that's what I thought. The Bone Star is not a good place. The sky here is always gray, as if it was blocked by a thick iron leather, and the sunlight cannot be penetrated at all. The ground was covered with sharp black rocks and uninterrupted sand. When the wind shaved, it could scrape off all the skin on people's faces. My base was a broken camp that I left when I was in my first mission, with a semi-collapsed alloy tent filled with damaged equipment and almost powerless energy bars. The food has been eaten up long ago, and now it depends on the strange plants I have made and the occasionally caught sandworms. In fact, those things taste like chewing rubber, and they also have a sour smell, but I don't have to choose. It's more pleasing to die of hunger than eating something disgusting. I have been trying to repair the destructive flying boat these years. It's not because I have so much confidence that I can fly back, but because I don't want to make a point. I'm afraid I will get crazy. The flying boat was parked in a valley a few kilometers away from the site. When it first fell, it fell into a scattered state, and the engine core was directly burned into a wasteland. However, I still dragged a bunch of broken copper wires back every day to try to use something I could use. Of course, the result is basically nothing. The warp engine is a thing that is strictly controlled by the Empire. The fuel formula is the ultimate secret. Even these explorers only know how to use it, not how to build it. Without fuel, even if I built the flying boat into a flower, I would not be able to fly out of this ghost planet. That day, as usual, I returned from the valley with a storm on my back, and my body was covered with broken parts that were rolled from the dead of the flying boat. The wind was very hard, and the sand hit my face like a knife. I could only lower my head, wrap my mouth and nose with a rag, and walk forward with my head hard. Suddenly, something hard seemed to be stepped on under my feet. It was not the usual gravel heads, but a bit like metal. I squatted down and slashed the sand with my hands, and found a black board with some strange lines engraved on it, which looked like some pattern. I felt a little nervous that this thing was definitely not an Imperial object, nor was it a part of my flight. Why is this thing on the Wilderness Bone Star? I lifted the board up and weighed it. It was quite heavy, and there was an icy feeling on the surface that I couldn't describe. Those lines are not engraved casually, such as some symbol or text, but I can't understand them at all. I feel a little bit angry, but I am more curious. I have been wandering on this broken planet in the past few years, and I have never seen any ghosts. Now, something suddenly appears, and I always feel a little unfavorable. But I have nothing to be afraid of. Anyway, I'm almost there, so what can be worse than now? The sandstorm was getting bigger and bigger, and I couldn't think much about it, so I hugged the board and rushed to the camp. Back in the tent, I threw the board on the table, lit up the faint light of only the remaining chicken, and began to study it carefully. Those lines are really strange, like maps, or some kind of mechanical drawing. The more I look at it, the more I feel that this thing may have something to do with the warp engine. Why do you think so? Because I remember reading some old files during training. I mentioned that the technology source of warp engines was not originally created by the Empire, but borrowed from an ancient civilization. Of course, these are all news, and the Empire has never accepted them. But if this board is really a thing of the ancient civilization, then I might be able to get my treasure? My heart beat a little fast and my hands began to shake. If this is really something related to the warp engine, even if it's just a small thread, it might be my only hope to leave this ghost place. I decided to go to that place again tomorrow morning, and maybe something else was buried under the sand. The next day, the sky was just dawn. In fact, the Wilderness Star was not divided into day and night, and the sky was always like that. I came out with a tool. The place was not far away. After about half an hour walking, I returned to the place where I discovered the board yesterday. The sandstorm had stopped, and the ground was still messy, but I saw more unfavorable things at a glance. The sand was blown a little by the wind, revealing more black metal fragments, and some slaughtered like stone pillars, half buried underground, with similar symbols engraved on it. I was shocked. This was definitely not something that was formed naturally. There is a glitch here. A real and possibly from ancient civilizations. I heard in the training of the Empire that I occasionally found this kind of thing on the alien stars in the Edge Galaxy, but most of them were blocked by the Empire, and ordinary people had no chance to touch it. I squatted down, plucked the sand with my hands, trying to dig out more. The more I dig, the more I am surprised. The scale of these dead bodies is much larger than I thought. For example, the foundation of a certain building has collapsed long ago, but it can be seen that it should have been quite grand at the beginning. Just as I was sweating profusely, I suddenly heard a low sound of rushing birds, as if something was shaking underground. I was startled and stood up tightly, staring around, and saw nothing. But the sound became more and more obvious, like the static of a certain machine actuation. I felt a little panicked. Where's the machine on this broken planet? Is it hard to say that the people from the Empire discovered me, and what did you send to capture me? I was about to run away when the sand under my feet suddenly collapsed and the whole person fell down. Fortunately, the bottom was not too deep, about 2 or 3 meters away. I fell on my butt, and it hurt so much that I was breathing. When I got up and looked, I found that I had fallen into an underground space, surrounded by black stone walls, and dense symbols were engraved on the walls, exactly the same as the board I picked up yesterday. There is a huge circular platform in the center of the space, with a faint blue light floating on it, which looks like some kind of energy field. I swallowed, and my heart was scared and excited. This place is definitely not simple, it may be the core of ancient civilization. I approached the platform carefully and found that something seemed to be floating in the blue light, like a stream of data. No, it's more like a projection, showing a bunch of complicated graphics and text. Although I can't understand it, it just told me that this might be the recipe for the warp engine fuel, or at least the relevant thread. I tried to reach out to touch the blue light, but my hand reached in. The entire platform suddenly shook, and the blue light became stronger in an instant, making my eyes unable to open. I tightened my hand, but it was too late. A strong flu spread throughout my fingers. I was so electric that I knelt on the ground, buzzing in my brain. When I came here, I found that there were some chaotic clips in my brain, such as some memory, but not my memory. There are huge stars in those clips, strange planets, and some vague figures saying something, but I can't understand a single word. I sat on the ground, gasping for breath, and my heart was in a mess. What are these things? Could it be that this mess can directly put some information into my brain? I have heard of the Imperial brain implantation technology, but that thing is used to control people. I have never seen this kind of direct infusion of information. As I recalled those fragments, I found that there seemed to be a substance mentioned, such as the core component of fuel, but I was completely unsure of what it was. Just then, a low engine sound suddenly came from outside. I felt a little nervous. This sound was so familiar. It was the patrol boat of the Empire. How did they come here? Did you find me? Or do they have known this existence for a long time and are they now going to recycle it? I didn't dare to think too much, so I tightly lifted a small stone slab with symbols engraved from beside the platform, stuffed it into my pocket, and then found a corner to hide. The engine sounds were getting closer and closer, followed by the sound of heavy boots stomping on the ground, and several rough sounds shouting, "Scan to show that there is energy fluctuation here, look for what it is." My heart was about to explode, and I tightened the dagger in my hand. Although I knew this thing was no different from the armored soldiers of the Empire. If they found me, I might not have the chance to resist and were killed directly. The law of the Empire is not human relations, and anyone who touches the secret of the warp fuel is only dead. I held my breath and heard their steps getting closer and closer, and my brain was moving quickly. If I can survive, I vow to figure out the secret of this tragic. Whether it's warp engine fuel or something, this may be the only chance to get me off this broken planet. The Empire wants me to stay here? Make a dream. Carl Wien, are not that easy to recognize. The sound of my foot stopped at the entrance, and I heard a cold voice saying, "There are signs of collapse here, go and take a look." I bit my teeth and prepared to meet the worst results, but an inexplicable fire ignited in my heart. I don't know what is hidden in this tragedy, but I know that if I could leave this alive, I must have let the Empire pay for throwing me here. I squatted in that dark corner, leaning against the cold stone wall, holding the broken dagger tightly in my hand, my heart beating as if it was about to pop out of my chest. The Imperial patrol team's footsteps were getting closer and closer, and the heavy boots stepped on the sand and stones, making the teeth sore. Their voices were low and cold, carrying the high spirits, as if they had long been sure that there was something hidden in this broken place. "The energy wave is nearby, and the instrument won't go wrong," a rough voice said. "If there is anything wrong, the people above will not let us go." "Stop talking, look for it," another voice slammed him, his language full of impatience. If Mr. Drax knew we were one step slower, we would have to go away. When I heard the name Drax, my heart sank. Let John Drax, the Iron Blood operator of the Silver Empire, be responsible for dealing with threatening guys like me. He heard that he had no living slap in his hands, and as long as he was targeted, it would basically be sentenced to death. I bit my teeth and flew around my brain, trying to find a way out. There is not much underground space here and there are not many places to hide. They will find me long ago. If I fight hard, I can't help it for a second. The armored soldiers of the Empire are not vegetarians. I glanced down at the small stone slab stuffed in my pocket, with symbols similar to those on the platform. This might be a quart of warp engine fuel or my death talisman. If they find it, I don't have the chance to explain it, and I just have a gun crash. I have to find a way to take off my body, run away with this rope, and then slowly figure out what is hidden in this escape. The sound of footsteps had reached the collapsed entrance, and I heard them crawling down, and the sound of the collision of the equipment was reverberating in this closed space, as if knocking on my heart. I glanced around and found a narrow piece on the stone wall that could hardly plug into a person. I didn't think much about it, and I moved my cat with my waist and forced myself into the zither. It was pitch black inside, and the air was covered with a damp earthy smell. My body was scraped with sharp stones, but I didn't dare to make a sound, so I could only grit my teeth and endure it. "There is a platform here, and there is energy left." The voice of a patrolman came from outside, with a little surprise. "This is not an Imperial technology, the report is advanced, this place must be blocked." "Don't worry, check if there are anyone around you," another voice said coldly. "In this place, there may be some exiles hidden." My heart was tightened, holding my breath, and I didn't dare to breathe. If their scanners were activated, I would not be able to hide them here, and the Imperial technique was not a pity. The scene where I suddenly flashed through my brain that was elected by the blue light, and those inexplicable memory clips emerged again. I tried to concentrate on thinking and found that there seemed to be a vague picture inside, a figure standing in a place similar to this platform, and then the stone walls around me suddenly moved, as if some passage had been opened. My eyes lit up. Can I tell if there is an escape passage here? I glanced at the static outside, and the patrolmen were still checking the platform, and I didn't notice it at the moment. I reached out and fumbled through the gap, trying to find out if there was any mechanism. Sure enough, there was a raised bulge on the stone wall, like a button. I hesitated for a moment, thinking that if I made a mistake, I might have directly touched some trap to bury myself. But those guys outside didn't give me too much time to consider it, so I gritted my teeth and pressed it hard. A low sound of rushing birds rose, and the entire underground space shook. I felt panicked, thinking I was finished, but then I found that the stone wall behind me had moved open, revealing a narrow passage, which was so dark that I could not see anything. The patrolman outside obviously heard the silence, and someone shouted immediately, "What sound? Check the surroundings quickly." I didn't have time to hesitate, and I kept moving into the passage, and ran forward without looking back. The passage was full of sand and gravel. When I ran, I slipped under my feet, but I didn't dare to stop. The patrolman behind had already chased after him. I heard them shouting, "There is a road here." That guy must have run away. Chase. My heart was secretly in my heart, and this helper responded too quickly. I ran desperately. The narrower the passage, the deeper the air became, and the deeper the air became, and the lungs seemed to be blowing open. I don't know how long I ran, but a little light finally appeared in front of me. I gritted my teeth and rushed over. I found that the exit was actually on a cliff. Below was an endless sea of black sand, with a shave like a knife. I gasped and looked around and found that this place was quite far away from my camp, and it should be the other side of the wilderness star. I looked back at the passage, and the patrolmen were getting closer and closer, and their scanners might have locked my position. For the next few hours, I stumbled around the sea of sand. My body was already broken by the sand, and I was still holding the small stone slab tightly in my hand. The people from the Empire did not catch up, maybe because the sandstorm broke out again, holding my scars. But I know, they won't let me go. People like Drax will definitely turn the entire Bone Star upside down and will also pull me out. The sky, if this broken planet could be considered as sky, became darker and darker, and I finally found a small cave that could barely cover the wind. I walked in, sat down against the wall of the cave, took out the stone slab, and looked at it again in the faint light. I still can't understand those symbols, but the memory fragments in my brain seemed to be getting clearer and clearer. I closed my eyes and tried to concentrate, and found that there was a mineral called star core crystal, which seemed to be the core component of warp engine fuel. The question is, where is this thing? I have never seen anything like this on the Bone Star. Just as I was thinking hard, a slight sound suddenly came from the entrance of the cave, like a footstep, but not as heavy as a patrolman. I suddenly opened my eyes, held the dagger tightly, and shouted in a low voice, "Who is there? Come out." A figure walked out of the darkness. It was a tall and thin woman wearing a ragged imperial uniform and covered with a layer of dust on her face, looking more wolves than me. She raised her hands and signaled that she had no weapons, and then said in Sha's voice, "Don't be nervous, I'm not from the Empire. My name is Elenos, and I'm a fugitive." I looked her up and down. Her uniform was indeed imperial, but the badge on her cuffs was torn off, as if she was deliberately not trying to be identified. I sneered, "Fugitive? In this broken place, who isn't a fugitive? Say, what do you want to fuck?" Ella ignored my sarcasm and walked straight to the entrance of the cave, took out a small water bag and took a sip, then said, "When I was running for my life, I heard the sound of the patrol boat, and guessed that someone might be chased by them nearby. I was not here to find trouble, I just wanted to cooperate." "Cooperate?" I raised my eyebrows. "I have nothing to give you, I'm almost gone." She looked at me, with a decisive determination in her eyes. "I can see that you are not an ordinary exile. The slate in your hand is something in the wild, right? I used to be a scientist in the Empire, specializing in warp engine fuel. I know what that symbol represents." I was shocked, and I didn't care if I put it on the surface. "Oh? Then what do you think, what is this thing?" Ella did not answer directly, but took out a small piece of metal fragment from her pocket, with similar symbols engraved on it. She said in a low voice, "This is the way ancient civilizations are recorded, with some recipes for warp engine fuel hidden. I've studied these things, but the Empire didn't allow anyone to touch the secret, so I defected. If the thing in your hand is really a part of the rage, we can crack it together and leave this haunted place." I stared at her, and my brain flew quickly. This woman doesn't look like she's being ruthless, but I can't trust her completely. People in the Empire are full of sensibility. Who knows if she is a greedy person and comes to trick me? But when I came back, I wasn't able to get this mess of bad symbols and memory clips. If she really understood this thing, she might be able to find that star core crystal. "Okay," I finally opened my mouth, still with my rill, "if I believe in you, how can we cooperate?" Ella's eyes lit up, as if she saw hope. "First, we have to escape the pursuit of the Empire. I know their patrol mode can help you avoid scanning. Secondly, we have to find more fragments and make a complete recipe. Finally, we have to get the star core crystal, which is the core of the fuel, but the Empire has long sealed all known mines." "Minnie?" I browned. Are you saying that thing on this broken planet? It's possible, Ella pointed out, although the Bone Star is in exile, the Empire has never explored this in a thorough way. According to my information, there may be undiscovered star core crystal mines here. However, we have to survive first to confirm. I was silent for a while, and my brain weighed the pros and cons. It is indeed risky to work with her, but if I have sex with her, I may not be able to survive tomorrow. Finally, I clicked, okay, cooperate. But I warn you that if you dare to play with flowers, I will not be vulgar. Ella smiled, as if relaxed. Don't worry, I don't want to die than you. In the next few days, Ella and I began to hide into bed on the Wilderness Star, avoiding the search of the Imperial Patrol team. She knew a lot. Not only could she crack the scan frequency of the patrol boat, but she could also extract traces from the memory fragments in my brain. We found that the energy field will appear in different shapes as the sandstorm changes, and sometimes new symbols or channels will appear. Ella said that this may be a defense mechanism for ancient civilizations and can only be touched in specific environments. We found another small slab in a sandstorm with more slabs and projection data. It took Ella several hours to crack those symbols and finally confirm the approximate location of the star core crystal in the extreme northern area of the Wilderness Star, a place marked as a forbidden area by the Empire. The place not only had a bad environment, but also had the Imperial Guards to protect possible mines. Forbidden area. I leaned against the rock, chewing a piece of dry plant roots in my mouth, and said with a wry smile, "Isn't this for us to die?" Ella slams her head, her eyes full of stubbornness. "If you don't try, we will never leave this." Do you know the Imperial thought control technology? The brain implantation command is never free as long as you are within their monitoring scope. The warp engine fuel can not only let us fly, but also interfere with their control signals. This is the only opportunity. I clicked a little, and a fire ignited in my heart. Of course I know the brain implantation technology of the Empire. Although I am an exile like me, I have heard that many rebels have been tortured by that thing and are worse than death. If fuel can really destroy that technology, it is not only my freedom, but also the hope of all those who are forced. Just as we were preparing to make a plan to go to the forbidden area, a low voice suddenly came from the entrance of the cave. "You are looking for star core crystals, are you?" Ella and I suddenly turned around and found a hunched figure standing at the entrance of the cave, wearing a torn robe, covered in patterns on our faces, and our eyes were so lit. I held the fastened dagger and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you? How do you know about us?" The man smiled and walked in slowly, carrying an inexplicable saying in his language. "My name is Zen, and he is an old resident on this planet. I know the star core crystal and the fuel formula you are looking for. Come with me, I can help you, but only if you have heard me." Ella and I looked at each other, and we felt a little uneasy. This guy appeared too suddenly, and the language he spoke was hard to understand. But there was something in his eyes that could not be said, as if he was hiding something, or as if he was trying to find us. I held the stone slab in my hand tightly and thought to myself, no matter whether this guy is an enemy or a friend, there seems to be no choice now. "Okay," I stood up and stared at him. "Lead the way. But I warn you not to play with flowers." Zen clicked a little, turned around and walked out of the cave, leaving a meaningful sentence. "Don't worry, I hate the Empire more than you do. But there are some secrets, more dangerous than you think." I looked at his back and felt an ominous premonition in my heart. What exactly does this guy know? Behind the star core crystal and fuel formula, is there even greater trouble waiting for us? I don't know, but I just told me that once this path continues, I will never be able to go back. We followed Zayn to leave the old cave. The sand was covered in the sky outside, and the Bone Star was as always like a dead tomb. Ella and I walked behind, with heavy steps, not saying anything, but there was a sense of anxiety in our eyes. This veteran who is called Zine has a strange and indescribable sense of strangeness. Although his pace is slow, every step seems to be calculated, with an inexplicable purpose. He said he hated the Empire. I believe that, but what was hidden in his eyes was definitely not just hatred. "Where are we going?" I finally couldn't help but open my mouth, and the sound was a little sandy when the wind was scraped. Zen didn't look back, his voice was as low as it was coming from the underground, the North Forbidden Zone. Are you looking for a star core crystal? There's what you want in that place, but there is also the most ruthless guardian team in the Empire. You'd better prepare yourself. Ella glanced at her eyebrows and said to me in a low voice, "This guy knows too much. I'm not sure if we can trust him." I clicked the head and replied in a low voice, "I don't think I'm against it, but since he knows the way, we will follow. There is really a problem, and I can't fight." After we walked for about a few hours, the terrain began to become even worse, and the black rocks on the ground became more and more pointed, as if we were about to pierce the base of the foot. The wind sand became even stronger, making people's eyes scattered. Zayan seemed to be so familiar with this place that it could not be more familiar. He brought us through dangerous areas after dangerous areas, and even knew where there was hidden water, which allowed us to replenish some water. I was secretly surprised in my heart that this old man was definitely not an ordinary exile. He even knew more about Huangxing than I had figured out in the past few years. When the sky darkened, although there was no real day or night on this broken planet, the light was indeed weak. We finally reached a huge valley. The valley was deep and the bottom was hard to see. The rock walls on both sides seemed to be slashed by some giant sharp blade, with an ominous breath. Zen stopped and pointed to the bottom of the valley and said, "The entrance to the Oscar North Forbidden Zone is below. The Empire built an outpost there to guard the possible star core crystal mines. If you want to enter, you have to get over them first." I looked down and found that I could see some metal structures, such as the temporary base of the Empire, with several patrol boats parked nearby, and the lights swept in the dark. Ella bit her lip and said in a low voice, "The defense here is more severe than I thought. We two of us combined can't fight a single armored soldier." Zine turned over and showed a meaningful smile on his face. "Who said he wanted to fight? There are some things on this planet, and no matter how advanced the technology of the Empire is, I can't handle it. Come with me, I know a way to pass through their scans." I looked at Ella and I was still half believing and half doubted, but now I have no choice but to follow him. Zayn took us down the edge of the ice valley and found a path hidden in the rock wall. It was so narrow that it could only pass through the side. Below was 1,000 feet deep and slid slightly. If it slipped a little, it would become a meat paste. My heart was beating fast, my palms were covered in sweat, but Zayn was so stable that it seemed like I was out of habit. After about half an hour we finally arrived at a secret cave entrance, which was pitch black inside, but we could hear a low sound of horns, as if there was some machine moving. Zen stopped and said in a low voice, "This is the passage left by ancient civilizations, leading directly to the depth of the prohibited area. People in the Empire do not know this road, but they have their monitoring equipment in it, so we have to be careful." I slapped the head and took out the broken dagger from my waist. Although I knew that this thing was similar to a toy for the Empire's technology, it could at least be powerful. Ella took out a small device from her pocket, saying it was a scan signal that could interfere with short-distance scanning. Although it was not guaranteed to be completely useful, it was a big deal. We all entered the hole in this way. The air inside was so turbulent that it made people feel slid. The stone under our feet was slid so hard that we had to be careful every step we took. The narrower the passage, the louder the sound of the birds became, and I could even feel the ground shaking slightly. Zen suddenly stopped and pointed to a stone wall in front of him and said, "This is the boundary point. After this, it is the scope of the star core crystal mine, but the Empire has set up an energy field nearby, and the power will be issued by the police. I can turn it off, but it takes time. You have to help me keep it." "Should?" I browned. "Are you sure we can stand the Imperial Patrol team?" Zine did not answer directly, but took out a stone with symbols from his long robe and began to chant something in a low voice, like some ancient language. A faint blue light suddenly lit up on the stone wall, exactly the same as the energy field I saw in the air before. I was shocked. This old man really has something to do with ancient civilizations. "Who is he?" Ella pulled me and said in a low voice, "Don't be stunned, be prepared. If he can really turn off the energy field, we have to rush in immediately, take the star core crystal and run away. I clicked the head, held the dagger tightly, and stared at the entrance of the passage. Sure enough, within a few minutes, a heavy sound of footsteps was heard from afar, accompanied by the mechanical friction sounds unique to the Imperial armored soldiers. I whispered, "Damn, it's coming soon." Ella quickly adjusted her interfering device and tried to cover our signals, but the scanners of the other party were obviously more advanced, and the pace was getting closer and closer, and a cold voice shouted, "There are unusual waves here, lock the target, and prepare to fire." My heart was tightened and I turned to look at Zayn. He was still chanting something. The blue light on the stone wall became brighter and brighter, but the energy field had not completely disappeared. I gritted my teeth and said to Ella, "It won't take long, we have to be the first one." Ella clicked her head and took out a self-made electric rod from her backpack. Although it was not very powerful, it could at least catch the other party off guard. We squatted at the corner of the passage, holding our breath, waiting for the first armored soldier to appear. Sure enough, an Imperial soldier in full armor walked in, and the red scan light on his helmet swept across the passage, instantly locking our positions. "Discover the goal, start fire," he shouted, lifted the thrust gun in his hand, and the blue energy beam rushed us directly. I rushed to one side, and the energy beam rubbed against my shoulders, smashed against the stone wall, and exploded a piece of gravel. Ella took advantage of the opportunity to rush up and smash the helmet with an electric rod. A harsh current sound came out. The soldier screamed and stumbled back, but soon two more armored soldiers rushed in. "Damn, it's not finished." I gritted my teeth, lifted a sharp stone from the ground, and smashed it hard at the knee joint of the second soldier. Although it was useless, it at least made him slow down. Ella's electric rod was gone, so she could only kick the other party in the chest with all her might and try to get some time. Just when we were about to get rid of it, Zine suddenly shouted, "It's done." The blue light on the stone wall instantly went out, the energy field disappeared, and a new road was revealed in the depth of the passage. He turned around and shouted at us, "Go in, I'll stop." Ella and I didn't have time to hesitate, so we rushed into the new passage, and there was a violent explosion sound from behind, as if Zayn had touched something, and he stopped the armored soldiers who were chasing him. We ran desperately, and the sound of the geese deep in the passage became louder and louder, and a strange smell began to roam in the air, like a metal burnt smell. After running about a few hundred meters, we suddenly opened up in front of us. We entered a huge underground cavity, and there was a mine with a gloomy blue light in the center, as if we were alive, constantly moving. My heart beat fast and I said in a low voice, "This is the star core crystal, right?" Ella pointed his head, his eyes filled with excitement. "That's right, this is what we are looking for. Hurry up, take a little and leave, the people of the Empire will not give us too much time." I took out an old metal container from my backpack and began to pry off the crystal fragments on the mine with a dagger. These crystals are so icy that there is even an influenza when they touch it, as if they are directly connected to my nerves. I suddenly flashed those memory clips in my brain, and this time it became clearer, showing a complete fuel formula, and the steps to activate the warp engine with star core crystals. "Carl, hurry up," Ella urged. She had heard the sound of footsteps coming from behind. It was obvious that the people of the Empire broke through Zen's obstacles. I gritted my teeth and speeded up, and finally pried off a large piece of crystal and stuffed it into the container. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly came from the entrance of the passage. "Carl Wien, do you think you can run?" I turned my head suddenly and found a tall figure standing at the entrance, covered with black Imperial armor, and the red light on my helmet stared at me like the eyes from the ground. "It's going to be the Drax. This guy is here." My heart sank, knowing that I really can't escape this time. Drax walked in slowly, followed by a team of elite armored soldiers, all of his guns facing us. He sneered, and the sound was sent out through his helmet, with mechanical replies. "I knew for a long time that you would not be able to stay alive. Star core crystal? Warp speed engine fuel? Do you think you can use these things to challenge the laws of the Empire?" Ella gritted her teeth and said to me in a low voice, "Carl, we have to fight." holding the crystals and finding a chance to run. I'll hold them. Drag a shit. I growled. What can you do alone? Let's go together, maybe you still have a way out. Drax seemed to hear our conversation and said mockingly, resistance? Interesting. But you should know that the law of the Empire is irresistible. There have been seeds of subsistence in your brains, and even if you think you are free, you cannot escape my control. As he finished speaking, I suddenly felt a stinging pain in my brain, as if someone was shaking a knife inside. I bit my teeth tightly and tried to resist, but the pain became stronger and stronger, almost making me kneel down. Ella's situation was not much better. She covered her head, her face turned pale, and she was obviously suffering the same torture. The Empire's brain implantation technology is indeed not a joke. Just as I was about to collapse, Zen's voice suddenly came from behind. Drax, your law is useless to me. I raised my head hard and saw Zen standing at the entrance of the passage, with a strange blue light emitting on his body, holding the stone engraved with symbols in his hand. He yelled, and the blue light burst instantly, like some kind of energy wave, rushing towards Drax and his team. The armored soldiers were overturned to the ground by the slam wave, and even Drax stumbled for a moment, and the red light on his helmet seemed to be disturbed. Go away! Zen shouted at us. I activated the extremely defensive system, but it won't take long. Hold the star core crystal and complete the fuel formula. I gritted my teeth, helped Ella up, held the container and ran deep into the passage. Drax roared angrily, Zai, you traitor! Do you think you can stop me? The Empire will crush you all. I didn't even look back, and I only had one thought in my brain: live and complete the fuel formula. There was a broken flying boat mooring area deep in the passage, and an old warp-speed flying boat was parked inside. Although it seemed to be about to fall apart, the engine core was still complete. Ella gasped and quickly checked the flying ship system, saying in a low voice, the fuel tank is still useful. Carl, put the star core crystal in, I'll start the formula synthesis. I clicked the head, stuffed the star core crystal fragments into the fuel tank according to the memory segment in my brain, and then helped Ella adjust the engine parameters. The flying ship began to vibrate violently, as if it would explode at any time, but I know that this is a precursor to the start of the warp engine. There was an explosion and gun sound coming from behind, and it was obvious that Drax broke through Zen's obstacle and was chasing him. It's done! Ella shouted, and the control panel of the flying boat lit up green, and the warp engine finally started, and a low thorn appeared. I quickly closed the door, helped the safety belt, and said to Ella, we have to leave immediately, otherwise we will be dead. As the flying boat lifted off, the rocks at the top of the cave began to collapse, as if the entire underground cavity was about to be crushed. Through the observation window, I saw Drax standing below, the red light on his helmet locking us tightly, as if he wanted to swallow us alive. My heart was tight, but then the flying boat accelerated suddenly, breaking through the rock layer, and entering the dusty sky of the wild bones and stars. We succeeded? I gasped, still a little unbelievable. Ella clicked his head and showed a tired smile on her face. Yes, but the Empire won't let us do that. Carl, the fuel formula has been synthesized, I backed up the data, and now I have to broadcast it so that all the rebels know this secret. I was stunned for a moment, then pointed out, good idea. The law of the Empire controls everything by fuel. If everyone can create a warp engine, their rule will be over. Ella quickly operated the control panel and sent out the fuel formula data through the star signal, covering the entire edge of the galaxy. Looking at the progress of the signal transmission, a long-lasting hope ignited in my heart. This is not only our escape, but also a resurgence to the Empire. The flying boat passes through the vast sea of wild bone stars and enters the vast starry sea. There is no darkness and unknown ahead. I held the rod tightly and said in a low voice, Era, Zen may not have escaped. He sacrificed himself and gave us this opportunity. We can't let him die in vain. Ella clicked her head, her eyes fixed. No. The Empire's pursuit has not ended yet, but we already have the weapons of resistance. Carl, where will we go next? I looked at the star and smiled at the corner of my mouth. look for a point to resist and continue this battle. Does the Empire think it will always be able to pose forever? They think beautifully. The flying boat accelerated, rushing towards the depths of the starry sea. The figure of the wilderness star behind it became smaller and smaller, but my heart was warmer than at any time. I know that this is just the beginning, and the real battle is waiting for us ahead.